Ahoy, mateys! Tonight, we're not just dipping our toes in the water. We're taking a deep, suffocating plunge into the 17th century Caribbean. We are hoisting the Jolly Roger, leaving the very memory of dry land to fade on the horizon, and setting a course straight for the dark heart of the Golden Age of Piracy. This was that infamous era, spanning roughly from 1650 to 1730, when the glittering sea served as a lawless battleground for outlaws, adventurers, rebels, and desperate souls. They were all chasing something, be it fortune, freedom, or a quick, violent death. But first, you must purge your mind of the fantasies. Banish the romanticized Hollywood versions, with their dashing, charming rogue captains sporting perfectly groomed beards and a glint in their eye. Erase the images of buried treasure maps where a convenient X marks the spot. Forget the epic, choreographed sword fights that look more like an acrobatic ballet than the clumsy, grunting butchery they truly were. No, we are diving headfirst into the gritty, terrifying, and scientifically accurate reality of a life of piracy. This is a journey backed by the ink-stained pages of historical records, the grim diagnoses of medical treatises from the era, and the unyielding, harsh truths of maritime survival. This is a world where your teeth loosen and fall, from gums turned purple and spongy by scurvy, a vitamin deficiency that haunted every sailor. The ship, your new home, is a floating, creaking petri dish of disease, its timbers saturated with the bacteria of dysentery, typhus, and infections that modern medicine would eradicate in a heartbeat. Here, the greatest threat you face daily is not a cannonball from a Royal Navy frigate, but a ladleful of stew from the ship's cook, whose culinary ignorance could poison you faster than any enemy blade. Do you truly believe you're a survivor? Perhaps because you have a thirst for adventure, have binge-watched every pirate film ever made, and once painstakingly built a ship in a bottle as a weekend hobby? Trust me, when confronted with this brutal, unforgiving reality, your modern sensibilities would see you broken within a week. And we are going to prove it, step by agonizing step, using vivid details drawn from historical accounts, like those in Captain Charles Johnson's definitive, A General History of the Pirates. If you find some educational amusement in watching your hypothetical self endure a brutal lesson in 17th century naval hygiene, a quick like or a subscribe would be a grand gesture. It helps us keep this historical vessel afloat. And, as always, I'm fascinated to see our global classroom in action. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, batten down the hatches. Find yourself a banana, not for its nutritional value, but for the sheer irony of holding a fruit so rich in the vitamin C these men would kill for. Let's begin our voyage and find out just how quickly you'd be sleeping with the fishes in Davy Jones' locker.
It begins as so many tragedies do, in a tavern. You're in a grimy, dimly lit establishment in a sweltering Caribbean port, perhaps the infamous pirate haven of Nassau, or the sin-soaked streets of Port Royal. The air, thick enough to chew, is a foul cocktail of cheap rum, pungent tobacco smoke, stale sweat, and the underlying stench of unwashed humanity. The low-ceilinged room is a cacophony of slurred shanties, drunken arguments in a half-dozen languages, and the clattering of wooden tankards on scarred tables. The flickering candlelight dances across faces hardened by sun and sea, casting eerie shadows that make scars look like canyons and missing teeth like black holes. You're nursing a tankard of what the barkeep called ale, but it's a watery, warm, and vaguely sour concoction, likely stretched with river water and whatever else could be found. The last clear thing you remember is a friendly stranger, a weathered sailor with a glinting gold tooth and a sly, conspiratorial grin, clapping you on the shoulder and insisting on buying you another round. It's on the house, he says. The drink he brings tastes a bit off, a strange, bitter undertone beneath the sweetness of the rum, but you're flattered by the attention. Free booze is free booze. You drain the cup. Your next sensation, is of 1,000 blacksmiths hammering in unison from the inside of your skull. You awaken not to the familiar lumpy mattress of your rented room, but to the rhythmic, nauseating sway of the sea. You're in a cramped, pitch-black space that reeks of a unique and horrifying perfume. The sour, stagnant stench of bilge water, the suffocating press of unwashed bodies crammed together like sardines, and the sharp, metallic tang of pure, unadulterated regret. Your mouth is as dry as a desert. Your vision is a blurry mess, and every muscle in your body screams in protest, a lingering agony from the knockout drug, likely a crude mix of opium or laudanum stirred into cheap rum that was slipped into your drink. The good news? You're on a boat, feeling the gentle rock of the waves. The bad news? It's a pirate ship. You are the newest, non-consenting member of the crew. And your new captain is a man who is far more likely to settle a human resources dispute with a blunderbuss than with a conversation. You've been press-ganged. This wasn't just a pirate tactic. It was a common and utterly brutal form of recruitment used by the Royal Navy and merchant fleets alike. Historical records show that thousands of men were kidnapped this way, dragged from taverns, brothels, or even quiet streets, and forced into a life of maritime service. It's human trafficking on the high seas, with no escape clause and no one to hear your pleas. The first thing that truly registers isn't the motion of the ship, but the sheer, claustrophobic filth of your immediate surroundings. You are below deck, in what laughably passes for the crew's quarters. It's a low-ceilinged, windowless cavern packed with rough-hewn wooden bunks stacked 3 high and hammocks made from coarse, abrasive canvas that sway in a chaotic, hypnotic rhythm. The floor is slick with a permanent film of moisture, sea spray, and spilled grog. In the oppressive darkness, you can hear the frantic scratching of rats, their tiny claws skittering against the wooden planks as they forage for scraps. The air is a physical presence, thick, humid, and almost unbreathable. It's a saturated blanket woven from the odors of pervasive mold, the sour stench of vomit from other seasick newcomers, and the faint, unsettling metallic scent of old blood, a reminder of recent floggings or brawls. Space is the ultimate luxury, and there is none to be had. You are shoulder to shoulder with dozens of other men, a tapestry of snoring, wheezing, and cursed muttering in a babel of languages. The gruff English of a naval deserter, the rapid-fire Spanish of a captured merchantman, the melodic French of a Huguenot refugee, and even the varied African dialects from escaped slaves who chose the pirate life as their only shot at a semblance of freedom. The humidity clings to your skin like a second greasy layer, and the constant groaning creak of the ship's timbers becomes a foreboding symphony, the soundtrack to your new prison. The second thing that hits you, literally, is a coiled length of rope thrown hard against your face. Your eyes, struggling to adjust, make out the silhouette of the quartermaster, a grizzled behemoth of a man whose face is a roadmap of knife fights and cannon blasts. He has more scars than teeth, and his voice is a gravelly bark, honed by years of shouting over the roar of storms and the chaos of battle. Get on deck, you lazy landlubber. Time to earn your keep, or I'll keel-haul ye myself. Keel-hauling. The word sends a jolt of pure terror through you, a cold dread that cuts through the fog of your hangover. You've heard the tales. To be dragged by a rope from one side of the ship to the other, right under the keel, your body scraped raw and shredded to ribbons by the thousands of sharp, calcified barnacles encrusting the hull. Few survived, and those who did wished they hadn't. Your first 5 minutes of this new life are spent in a state of nauseous confusion, stumbling up a narrow, perilously steep ladder towards a sliver of light. Your head pounds, your stomach churns violently with the ship's pitch and roll, and the quartermaster's boot on your backside provides ample motivation. As you emerge onto the deck, blinking into the blinding tropical sunlight or the overwhelming canopy of a starry night, the grim reality solidifies. This ship is now your prison, your workplace, and in all likelihood, your tomb. The deck stretches out before you, a chaotic landscape of thick, coiled ropes, barrels of supplies lashed down, and grim-faced men hauling on lines, all under the watchful, predatory eye of the captain, perched on the quarterdeck like a vulture surveying his domain. Massive white sails billow and snap high above, straining against the wind like captive giants. The horizon, a perfect, unbroken circle of blue, is a beautiful and terrifying sight, a stark visualization of your sudden and complete loss of freedom. You glance back desperately towards the land you came from, but it's already a faint, hazy smudge, receding into the distance. The ship is well underway. Swimming is not an option unless you wish to personally introduce yourself to the local population of sharks. In these opening moments, pure panic sets in. Who are these people? How do I escape? But escape is a delusion. Mutiny means a gruesome death, and jumping overboard in these shark-infested waters is just a faster, wetter form of suicide. You have miraculously survived the initial shock. The seasickness may have subsided into a constant, low-grade nausea, and you haven't yet fallen from the rigging or been flogged for incompetence. Now, the slow, grinding, monotonous reality of a pirate's life begins to set in, wearing you down day by day like waves eroding a cliff face. This is not the adrenaline-fueled adventure of stories. It is a relentless, soul-crushing battle against boredom, hunger, filth, and the slow-motion decay of your own body. Let's begin with your diet, for it is the foundation of your misery. It is a monotonous, nutritionally bankrupt disaster, engineered for longevity over anything resembling taste, pleasure, or health. Your primary staple, served at nearly every meal, is hardtack. These are not biscuits as you know them. They are slabs of flour, water, and a bit of salt, baked multiple times until they achieve the density and hardness of a brick. The purpose is to prevent mold on long voyages. Stored in massive barrels in the ship's hold, they are meant to last for months, even years. But in the humid, sweltering climate of the Caribbean, they often soften just enough to become a welcoming home for life. And by life, I mean weevils. The small, black beetles infest the biscuits, laying their eggs inside, so that generations of them live and die within your food supply. A common dinnertime ritual is to slam the hardtack firmly on the table, watching the stunned insects fall out before you take a bite. Here we must engage in some myth-busting. Contrary to popular belief, the pirates didn't complain much about the weevils. In a diet almost completely devoid of fresh protein, they were often grimly referred to as a bonus. You quickly learn to eat your biscuits in the dark of the lower deck, so you can't see the little black specks wriggling around. Or, you learn to crush them into a powder and mix them with water to make a crude porridge, where the bugs are less noticeable. Historical accounts from sailors like Woodes Rogers describe this as entirely commonplace. Your other main source of sustenance is salted meat, usually pork or beef, preserved in barrels packed with coarse brine to ward off rot. After months at sea, this meat becomes so incredibly hard and salty that it has to be soaked for hours in precious, rank freshwater just to make it chewable. When finally cooked, it has the texture of a leather shoe and a taste that suggests it was marinated in the ocean itself. Occasionally, the monotonous diet is broken by dried peas or beans, boiled into a bland gray mush called burgoo, but these stores are often just as moldy or infested as the hardtack. Fresh food is a forgotten dream. If the ship is lucky enough to stop at an uninhabited island, the crew might feast on turtles or fish, but such occasions are rare luxuries. The water you drink is a slow poison. Stored in large wooden casks, it quickly turns green and slimy with algae, developing a foul, swampy taste. To make it palatable, it is often mixed with rum, creating grog. This concoction helps mask the taste and the bacteria, but it contributes to a state of constant, low-level inebriation and dehydration among the crew, leading to mistakes, fights, and accidents. And then there is the disease that this diet guarantees: scurvy. With virtually no vitamin C available, this debilitating disease, caused by a breakdown in the body's ability to produce collagen, is not a risk. It is an inevitability. Within a few weeks, the symptoms begin their insidious creep. First, you feel an overwhelming weakness and lethargy, your energy sapped as if your very life force is draining away. Then, your gums begin to swell, turning a spongy, purplish black. They bleed at the slightest touch, and your breath takes on the foul stench of rot. Soon after, your teeth loosen in their sockets, eventually falling out one by one, making the simple act of eating an agonizing ordeal. Old wounds, even minor cuts from splinters that had healed weeks ago, spontaneously reopen and refuse to close. Unexplained, dark bruises appear all over your body, and your skin turns sallow and pale. In its advanced stages, scurvy leads to internal bleeding, jaundice, fever, and finally, a painful death. Scurvy was the single greatest killer of sailors during the Age of Sail, claiming an estimated 2 million lives, far more than were ever lost in naval battles. You watch in horror as an older sailor, a man who seemed tough as oak, weakens day by day, his body failing him from the inside out, knowing that the same fate is stalking you. But scurvy is not your only medical worry. Your malnourished body is a welcoming host for a litany of other afflictions. Beriberi, from a lack of thiamine, causes nerve damage and heart failure. Pellagra, from a niacin deficiency, leads to the 3 Ds: dermatitis, diarrhea, and dementia. Your body, accustomed to the balanced meals of a modern world, is in a state of open rebellion. This physical decay is compounded by the utter absence of hygiene. The very concept is a laughable luxury. Fresh water is far too precious for washing. It is strictly rationed for drinking. You might occasionally bathe by wiping yourself down with a rag dipped in salt water, which does little to clean you and instead leaves your skin chafed, irritated, and prone to infections. Your coarse woolen clothes are a thriving ecosystem for lice and fleas, which are not just an itchy nuisance, but also vectors for typhus, known grimly as ship fever. An outbreak of typhus could burn through a crew with terrifying speed, leaving dozens dead in its wake. Dysentery, or the bloody flux, is a constant threat, spreading rapidly from the contaminated water casks. It causes violent diarrhea, dehydration, and often a miserable death. The ship's toilet, or head, is simply a hole or a small platform at the bow of the ship, open to the sea. In rough weather, it's unusable, and the crew is forced to use buckets below deck, which slosh and spill their foul contents with every roll of the ship. The bilge, deep in the ship's belly, constantly fills with a foul sludge of seawater, leaking food stores and human waste, which must be pumped out by hand in a thankless, backbreaking task. This stinking pool is also a breeding ground for rats, which carry their own host of diseases, including the dreaded plague. Medical care is a terrifying prospect. If there is a surgeon, he is often a former barber or butcher whose primary tool is a saw for amputations, performed without anesthetic beyond a large swig of rum for the patient, and cauterized with hot tar. In the midst of this chaos and decay, you discover that a pirate ship is not, in fact, a lawless free-for-all. You are introduced to the pirate code. Most pirate vessels operated under a strict set of rules, the Articles of Agreement, which every crew member had to sign or make their mark upon when joining, often with a toast of rum to seal the pact. One evening, the quartermaster unrolls a worn parchment on a barrelhead, and you are called forth to pledge your allegiance. You learn that this code is a form of maritime democracy, remarkably progressive for its time. Unlike the tyrannical hierarchy of the Royal Navy, the pirates elected their captain and quartermaster by popular vote. Every man on board, including you, has a vote in all major decisions: where to sail, whether to attack a prize, what rules to live by. The division of loot is spelled out explicitly and is far fairer than on merchant ships. The captain might get 2 shares, skilled officers like the surgeon or navigator 1.5, and every common sailor like yourself a single full share. The code covers every aspect of life. No fighting amongst the crew on board ship. Disputes were to be settled ashore with pistols or cutlasses. Lights out by 8 p.m. to conserve candles and prevent fire, and musicians were to be given a day of rest on the Sabbath. But the punishments for breaking the code are swift and brutal, designed to maintain order through fear. If you are caught stealing from a fellow crewmate, the penalty is marooning, being left on a deserted island with only a flask of water, a pistol, and a single shot. The message is clear: use it to hunt, to defend yourself, or to end your own misery. If you show cowardice in battle, you might have your nose or ears slit. Desertion is met with a flogging from the cato, nine tails, a vicious whip designed to shred the flesh from a man's back. This code is the only thing holding the volatile, violent crew together, but it means that one foolish mistake could be your last. You make your mark on the parchment, your hand trembling slightly, realizing you have just signed a contract that governs every aspect of your life and death. Your first weeks have bled into a month, and you are a changed man. The blisters on your hands have hardened into thick, leathery calluses. You've learned to anticipate the roll of the ship, to move with a sailor's gait. You can tie a bowline knot in the dark and can tell the difference between the scent of an approaching rain squall and the everyday stench of the ship. You have learned to stomach the weevils, to ignore the constant damp, and to sleep through the symphony of groaning timbers and snoring men. You are not yet a pirate, but you are no longer a landlubber. You are a survivor, teetering on the edge of a precipice. The monotonous cycle of watches, 4 hours on, 4 hours off, is broken only by the occasional storm that tests every fiber of your being. During a squall, you lash yourself to the mast to avoid being washed overboard by the massive waves crashing over the deck, your hands numb and slipping on the frigid, wet ropes. It is during one of these grueling, mind-numbing watches, with the sun beating down mercilessly from a cloudless sky, that the cry finally comes from the lookout perched high in the crow's nest. "Sail ho!" A jolt of electricity surges through the ship. Lethargy vanishes, replaced by a tense, predatory excitement. On the horizon, you spot it, a smudge of white that slowly resolves into the sails of a merchant vessel. She looks fat and slow, likely laden with sugar, tobacco, or perhaps even gold from the Spanish Main. This is the moment you have been dreading and, to your own surprise, anticipating. This is the reason many of these men chose this life, the promise of a fortune in a single, violent afternoon. The chase is not a swift affair, but a calculated, hours-long pursuit. Your ship, a nimble sloop with a shallow draft, is designed for speed and maneuverability. The captain shouts orders, and you and the crew scramble to adjust the sails frantically, trimming and angling them to catch every wisp of wind. The merchantman, a slower but potentially more heavily armed brig, might choose to run or to fight. Flags are hoisted. First, the colors of a friendly nation to lull the target into a false sense of security. Then, as you close the distance, it is lowered, and a new flag is raised, the blood-red banner, or, more terrifyingly, the Jolly Roger. The sight of the skull and crossbones, an icon carefully cultivated to strike paralyzing terror into the hearts of merchant crews, is often enough to make them surrender without a single shot being fired. Psychological warfare is a pirate's greatest weapon. Men like Edward Teach or Blackbeard understood this perfectly. He famously wove slow-burning fuses into his immense black beard and lit them before battle, surrounding his head with a cloud of acrid smoke to appear as if he were a demon emerging from the depths of hell itself. Today, however, the merchant captain is brave, or foolish. A puff of smoke erupts from his stern, and a cannonball skips harmlessly across the waves in a warning shot. The time for intimidation is over. Your captain bellows, "Prepare for battle." The deck, once a space of routine labor, transforms into a well-orchestrated machine of death. The crew works with grim efficiency. Boys no older than 12, the powder monkeys, scurry below deck to rush gunpowder cartridges up to the cannon crews. The decks are doused with buckets of sand to soak up the inevitable blood and prevent the men from slipping. The ship's surgeon lays out his terrifying array of saws, knives, and probes on a piece of canvas near the mainmast, a grim station for the butchery to come. Your ship maneuvers to bring its cannons to bear for a broadside. You are part of a gun crew, your heart pounding in your chest like a drum. The gun captain screams, "Fire!" The world dissolves into a deafening, concussive roar. The entire ship shudders violently, the force of the blast slamming into your chest and leaving your ears ringing with a high-pitched whine that will last for hours. The air instantly fills with a thick, choking fog of black powder smoke, burning your eyes and lungs and reducing visibility to mere feet. You hear the whistle of incoming cannonballs, a terrifying sound that signals impending destruction, and then you witness the true horror of naval combat. A cannonball from the enemy ship doesn't just punch a neat hole in your hull. It smashes through the thick oak planks and explodes thousands of dagger-like wooden splinters inward at incredible speed. These flying shards eviscerate anything and anyone in their path. You see a man standing near you suddenly collapse, his chest a bloody ruin, killed not by the cannonball itself, but by the very ship meant to protect him. Surgeons, journals from the period are filled with horrific descriptions of decks slick with blood and gore, men disemboweled or decapitated by these flying timbers. You huddle behind the relative safety of the gunwale, but you know that nowhere is truly safe. The cannonade continues, a brutal exchange of iron and wood. Your ship's guns disable the merchantman's rigging, tearing her sails to shreds and leaving her crippled in the water. The order is given to board. Grappling hooks, large hooked irons on thick ropes, are thrown across the gap, lashing the two ships together with a sickening crunch. Now comes the most dangerous part. You and the other boarders, armed with a cutlass, an axe, and a brace of single-shot pistols, swing across on ropes or run across hastily laid planks. You are no trained swordsman. Your only instruction was a few crude lessons in hacking and slashing from the quartermaster. The cutlass, a short, heavy, curved blade, is not a weapon of finesse. It is a tool for brutal, close-quarters butchery. The fighting on the enemy deck is a chaotic, clumsy, and terrifying melee. The decks tilt and sway with the waves, your footing treacherous on the blood-slick sanded wood. The air is filled with the screams of the wounded, the clash of steel, and the acrid stench of smoke and blood. You grapple with a sailor, your pistol long since fired and now just a heavy club in your hand. You stab and hack wildly, driven by pure adrenaline and the primal instinct to survive. A man next to you falls with a choked gasp, a boarding axe buried in his skull. There is no glory here, only brutal, desperate violence. If the enemy crew surrenders quickly, quarter might be given. But if they put up a stiff resistance, the battle ends in a slaughter. Finally, it is over. The merchant flag is struck, and a cheer goes up from your crewmates. You have won. The aftermath is almost as horrific as the battle itself. Victory brings loot, but the cost is steep. The wounded from both sides lie groaning on the decks. The surgeon gets to work, his saw grating against bone as he performs hasty amputations, the screams of his patients echoing across the now quiet sea. Infections will claim many of those who survive the initial wounds. The dead are unceremoniously sewn into their own canvas hammocks with a final stitch through the nose to ensure they are truly dead, weighted down with a cannonball, and dumped overboard with a brief, mumbled prayer. The plunder is brought on deck. The quartermaster, acting as an impartial arbiter, presides over the division of the loot. It's rarely a chest full of gold doubloons and pieces of eight. More often, the cargo consists of valuable goods, barrels of sugar, bolts of silk, crates of tobacco, spices, and always rum. These are tallied, and each man receives his allotted share. Your share might be enough to live like a king for a few months, a fortune beyond your wildest dreams just a short time ago. Able-bodied men from the captured crew are given a choice: join the pirates or be cast adrift. Many, seeing the promise of wealth and a fairer life, choose to join, and so the crew is replenished. With the prize secured and the loot divided, the ship sets course for a pirate haven like Tortuga or the bustling, lawless streets of Nassau. Shore leave is a period of wild, frenzied debauchery. You and your crewmates descend upon the taverns and brothels, squandering your hard-won fortune on rum, women, and gambling. Fights are common, and the risk of being robbed or murdered is as high here as it was at sea. Diseases like syphilis spread rampant. For a few weeks, you live in a drunken haze of excess, but all too soon, the money is gone. Broke, hungover, and often in debt, you and your shipmates have no choice but to sign back on for another voyage, returning to the sea to risk your lives all over again. This is the cycle of your life now. But it is a short one. The average career of a pirate during the Golden Age was just 2 to 3 years, according to historians like David Cordingley. The noose, the sword, or disease was always waiting. The Royal Navy and the Spanish Guardacosta began hunting pirates with relentless efficiency, closing the havens and offering pardons to those who would turn informant. Your end, when it comes, is inevitable and will almost certainly be grim. Perhaps you are finally cornered by a naval frigate, your ship outgunned and boarded. You are captured, clapped in irons, and taken to be tried in an admiralty court. The evidence against you is overwhelming, perhaps sealed by the testimony of a former crewmate who turned King's evidence to save his own neck. You are found guilty and hanged at gallows point, your body left to swing in a gibbet cage as a gruesome deterrent to others who might dream of the pirate life. Your last sight is the jeering crowd and the tightening noose. Or perhaps your end comes from within. A drunken brawl over a game of cards or an accusation of cheating escalates. A pistol is drawn in the smoky hold of the ship, and you are shot, left to bleed out on the filthy floorboards. Or you join a mutiny against a tyrannical captain. If you win, you live to sail another day under a new leader. If you lose, you are marooned or keel-hauled. But most likely, your end is quiet, ignominious, and slow. After a few years, your luck simply runs out. The filthy conditions finally catch up to you. A raging fever from malaria or yellow fever takes hold, leaving you delirious and weak until you expire in your hammock. A simple infection from a splinter, festering for weeks, turns septic and poisons your blood. Or dysentery finally claims you, leaving you fatally dehydrated. Statistically, disease killed far more sailors than anything else. You die not in a blaze of glory, but in a miserable, feverish sweat, and are dumped unceremoniously into the vast, indifferent ocean. The romance of piracy is a powerful myth, but it is a lie. There was no buried treasure, no swashbuckling adventure, only a desperate, brutal, and short life in a floating world of filth and violence. The freedom they sought was fleeting, always paid for with the currency of blood. So the next time you see a pirate film, remember the reality, the weevils in the biscuits, the festering wounds, the constant fear, and the overwhelming odds stacked against you. The sea's beauty hides a terrifying truth, and in that world, you were never meant to survive.